Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of PS Younger Self. And hi, Eric Roberge. It's very nice to meet you. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, my pleasure, Chris. This is going to be a good conversation.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. We don't usually cover financial topics on PS Younger Self. It's a personal development podcast, but I know we discussed offline that this will be more about the kind of psychological mindset around money and financial planning because I'm sure you will agree there's so much of psychology and our emotions that are affect our kind of money decisions and how people go about and planning their financial future. And I know personally, I've experienced a lot of kind of negative experiences with money, kind of with my history with my family. So I just want to kind of set that stage. So as the first question, I want to ask you, Eric, what would you say, knowing that, like, what is the number one thing you believe people get wrong or misunderstand about money and wealth, building wealth?
Well, I think it has to be that the belief that money in itself is going to provide the happiness or the access to the life that you want to live, because
Mhm.
it's not.
So you don't think
It's
money buys happiness? Like
I
old
don't
school.
I think money can be used to facilitate happiness, but I don't think it buys it in and of itself. Like if you're not doing the work on yourself to
Mhm.
really evolve and understand who you are and who you want to be, then money is just going to confuse you and distract you from the things that you really need to focus on to get to be that person you want to be.
Got it. So then a lot of the work would start from within, understanding kind of like what are your financial goals, or maybe even what do you say? Because I believe that I've kind of experienced some money wounds, as I kind of alluded to in it before, and having some discussions with other people in my network and doing some additional research. I do believe that some people have some type of wounds or some psychological kind of negative impact with money. For example, for me personally, part of my money wound comes from the fact that I've witnessed growing up my parents fight a lot about money. And I believe in that it's very common knowledge that couples fight, or the number one reason that couples divorce is because of money, right? And if they don't divorce, they're fighting about money. And then I know that my dad had a gambling addiction. So I became very risk averse with like taking risk with my money. So if someone grew up with kind of that experience where money was associated with something negative, like, and from their past, how would you kind of advise or talk to someone, because your expertise is helping people plan their financial future, help build security, help build financial wealth. But if they have that past and kind of fear, where does one begin before you start planning for future?
And you're touching on a really important topic where people come from experiencing different things in their life when they were younger, and they develop this what they call a money blueprint or a
Oh,
money mindset.
okay.
And it's almost like it's this thing that's hidden behind you, and you don't even necessarily know why you react a certain way about money, but
Yeah.
you do because of your experiences at a younger age. And until you identify what has happened and caused you to think certain things about money, whether positively or negative, whether you have a good relationship or a bad relationship about the money itself,
Mhm.
you're probably not going to move past that. And it's always going to show up in various ways, as you pointed out, in relationships, especially. Because when you meet somebody, you develop this relationship that is not money based, most likely, and you learn to love each other through the non financial aspects of life. And then suddenly money does come into the relationship because it does for everybody, because we need it as a tool. And that's where things hit the fan. And people just don't understand that because it's this ghost behind the scenes, this
Mm.
this money blueprint that's really driving the interactions between the two people.
I like how you play it, the ghost behind the scenes, until you become aware and confront it, right? So you said identification is the first step. Does that basically mean we need to become self-aware and acknowledge our past? And if we do, then what is the next step to move on beyond identification and awareness?
Well, knowing that, I mean, as it's hopefully obvious, I'm not a psychiatrist, psychologist, or anything psychoanalysis, but I think that next logical step would be to say, all right, this is what happened. It doesn't mean that I have to be a certain way going forward or have to have a certain set of beliefs going forward. The
Hmm.
acknowledgement can say, this is why I think a certain way. There's an objectivity to the future saying, like, I don't have to be that way. I don't have to think a certain way. I don't have to react a certain way. And if now I am more grounded in who I am and why I am the way I am, I can change or alter my future by saying, money is a tool. And I just have to learn, just like any other tool,
Yeah.
how to use it effectively to increase my life instead of having it be a weight on it.
Yeah. Well, that's just a reframing, right? Like a mindset tool. And I like how you said, if you start thinking that money is just a tool, like it doesn't have to be something that weighs you down that you're afraid of because of your past experience and associations. But if you think of it as a tool that can actually drive you forward towards those financial goals that you want, then you can see it as that tool to move you in that direction that you want to go. So on that note, then I want to talk about like financial goals, because there's many different like I believe it's very personal, right? Money is very personal. We talked about the wound aspect, but our past, but having financial money goals is also personal. And I personally realized this when I was having a recent conversation with a group of friends, and all of them are smart, brilliant, and a mix of entrepreneurs and coaches, etc. And several of them was like, "Yeah, I just want to make a shitload of money," and and I said, that's great. That used to be my goal a few years ago when I lived in New York City and climbing the corporate ladder, until I realized after the fact I was living in lifestyle inflation. Now my financial goal is more about building um, passive income streams so I can live a certain way without trading my time for money. So how can one identify, because there's just so many other ways of looking at it, right? And financial security is very different than building wealth.
Well, you hit on a word there that I was going to bring up, and you just did, wealth. Right? If we
Mhm.
look at the traditional definition of wealth, it means having a lot of money, right? And people
Yeah.
look at the wealthy and how great their life is and how many things they have, and just how much they seem to be enjoying themselves.
Yes.
But I would say wealth isn't necessarily defined, and you could define any word in any way, but I wouldn't define wealth as having a lot of money. I would define wealth more broadly, saying that you have abundance in the areas that are most important to you.
Hmm.
And if you want abundance in the areas that are most important to you, like freedom, freedom to choose how to live your life, more time with family, traveling, not
Yeah.
having to be tied to your 9 to 5 job. But
Hmm.
if these things start to show up as really important to you, those can be some of the values or the goals that you're trying to build toward. And then you can start to use that money, the cash flow that you have, to grow your wealth in a way that's directed towards those items and not just growing wealth for growing wealth's sake, which becomes a very feudal, uh, kind of a hamster wheel type of environment.
Exactly. So then if I came to you, Eric, or someone like me who had that clear vision and goal that for me, it's not about more zeros, Eric, but I want to build wealth. And wealth to me means having that freedom where I'm not trading time for money, but I have that freedom to live comfortably, do what I want without having to worry about money. So then how would you guide someone like me with that type of financial goal to start building that plan to build that level of wealth? You have some
There-
core kind of like fundamentals of,
yeah, yeah. And there's no direct way, very clear cut, black and white. Here's how you do it,
yeah,
right? Because the minute you start down a path with anything in life, new information comes up, and you have to adjust immediately to that new information because it might send you down a rabbit hole that you don't want to go down if you don't. For example, right?
yeah. What do you
Whether
mean?
you're
Mhm.
like, think about you start a business. A lot of people want to start a business and they hear I should have a 1 year, a 5 year, and a 10 year business plan.
Yeah,
And if anybody's done this and been in business for at least several years, right, running right their 5 or 10 year business plan, and they look at that business plan, they're going to identify things that just didn't come to fruition, or assumptions that were made that were completely wrong. Not because they were a bad planner, but because we don't know what the future is all about. And so once we get that information, we have to readjust and develop the plan again. And so
hmm,
with your finances, there's a constant evolution of things.
hmm,
So right now you say, I want financial freedom. We would say, well, okay, so what does this lifestyle even look like to you that would reflect this freedom you're talking about?
okay,
And then we can start to talk about, well, how much does the lifestyle cost?
okay,
And if we have a set of annualized expenses that say, all right, well, here's the lifestyle I want to live, and here's how much it would cost me to live this way, we could back into say, well, how much do you need to make in whatever fashion you want to be able to live that way?
hmm,
Then we would talk about the fact that you're not always going to necessarily be able to work. And so if you are not making passive income where you're not necessarily working for the money and you have to actually spend the hours to work, how long can you work for? And when you stop working, if your lifestyle looks the same, you're going to need money from somewhere. And therefore, we have to back into how much you need to save for that time of your life when you're not working anymore to be able to continue the lifestyle that
got
you're
it.
living. Right. So there's pieces to that. There's a short term piece, cash flow and spending. And there's a long term piece, saving and investing to grow your wealth in a way that you can create your own income when you
Mhm.
don't make money anymore.
Got it. So in that kind of planning scenario, when you take all those variables into account, as you mentioned, you also mentioned like saving and investing, and those are two very different things. And would you, how do I phrase this question? For someone again trying to build a passive income stream and their wealth that way, should that person be looking at a percentage of saving a certain way and a percentage of investing a certain way, different than, let's say, someone who wants to just accumulate a lot more money, um, not so much like the passive income stream? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think so. I think so. Let me see if I get that right. Or the response, my answer, if it's off, you just let me know.
Hmm, hmm.
It's a very nuanced conversation, which I enjoy because all of my conversations with my clients are nuanced
Of
because you
course.
take into account what they want, what the situation looks like now, what the situation might look like later.
Yeah.
But so if you're someone who is working 9 to 5, and I'm saying
Yes.
9 to 5 is a general, I go
Yeah,
to work, I make money, I come home, I stop working, I go back to work.
exactly.
And you make, I don't know, $300,000 a year, right? It's decent living, right? You're making $300,000 a year. You can save 25% of your income and put it into investments, put it into the stock market, just as a general bucket.
Mhm.
And you can continue to make that money. And every year you're saving 25%. You're going to grow wealth to a point where you're not going to have to work anymore at that job that makes you $300,000 because you're going to have assets that you can take from to live a certain way.
Mhm,
Right?
mhm,
That's one very straightforward way to take your income and create wealth.
mhm,
If you're somewhere and that's doing something a little bit differently, maybe starting a business or looking to create that passive income stream, you're still going to have to make money at some point initially to spend and to be able to afford yourself. But maybe the money isn't going into the stock market, but it's going back into your business.
Okay.
right? And so now pick I don't know, let's say you're making $300,000 out of your business now, but that 25% goes back into your business. So you're growing your business in a way that the business is the asset. It's a
Mm-hmm.
much more risky way to go because all of your eggs are in one basket. That is the business.
Mm-hmm.
But if you grow that business to a place where you can sell it
Mm-hmm.
for millions, right? You see this all the time in the tech world. And therefore, there's your money again. There's your wealth you've created by making that sale because you focus all your time and energy and finances into the business itself.
Got it. Okay. Well, what about if someone, because $300,000 annual income for someone in the corporate world, I think that's a smaller percentage. If someone says, Eric, I'm not making $300,000, let's say if they're not even making six figures yet, can they start to build wealth? And how would you advise someone who maybe has not hit that six figure yet, but I believe you particularly work with like people, professionals in their 30s and 40s. So are they not too late if they're not making six figures yet to start planning for financial security and wealth? And how would you advise someone like that who doesn't make like $300,000 a year?
Yeah, I would say there's a way for everybody to get to where they need to go. It's going to be that there's a different, I mean, there's facts here, right? If you're not making six figures, you can't spend as much as somebody who makes six figures. So keeping up with the Joneses, if your friend is Mr. Jones or Mrs. Jones that makes six figures, you can't live their lifestyle,
Mm-hmm.
which is very hard with social media and everybody's showing all these great lives that they're living and you're trying to match those lives, but you can't afford it. That's
Mm-hmm.
okay, but don't try it. Don't convince yourself you can.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, pull back and say, within my income that I make, how much can I save and still live a decent life? So maybe it's not 25% of your income, maybe it's 10%. If you're not saving 10% now, start saving 10%.
So is that like the minimum? Like you should at least start with 10% of your earnings in the savings bucket. Like if you're not, like you need to really carefully look and maybe you're overspending and living in lifestyle inflation.
I
Is that
think 10% is a good number, but if you're saving zero, 1% is a good number.
okay?
If you go to the gym,
Yeah.
if you go to the gym, right, and you're going to squat, you go to the squat rack, and you think you're going to squat 300 pounds when you've not ever squatted before, that's a dumb idea, right? Just use the bar and see how that goes, and then
Start with
you add a couple weights.
mm-hmm. Got it.
Same
Okay,
thing with your money.
got it. So then if you start investing, I mean, saving little by little, how about if, okay, Eric, like someone says, I started saving about 10% for a few years now, then how can I look at my percentage of money allocation then for investing? So again, I know you mentioned, and it's very nuanced again because of everyone's situation, how much they make, and everything included. But just kind of a starting point. If someone's already starting to have saved for a bit, can they start looking at what percentage to go into like investments? Because that's where you can start to like also start passively make money, right? Through investments.
Yeah, no, I think the first stage is to build up your emergency reserve account, which is that
Mm,
oh shit money. Like something
yeah.
happened, I can't afford to pay for my car breaking down. That's a problem. So save the money in the bank until you get to
Mm-hmm.
1 to 3 months of expenses. I think ideally, that three month target is a good first way to go.
Mm-hmm.
Once you have that money set aside, so say if you spend $4,000 a month times three, that's $12,000 should be set aside for protection against things that you're not expecting to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can start to invest the money above that point,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the easiest way to go is to say, how much per month can I just put into an investment account and automate it and not think about it? If you have a 401k at work that's going to give, an employer is going to give you a matching contribution if you put in 3%, put in 3% because the matching contribution is free money for you.
Exactly.
If you don't have that, then open up a brokerage account at Vanguard, Fidelity, Schwab, anywhere that you feel comfortable, and start to automate that. So every paycheck, something comes out of your bank account and goes into that account, and you don't have to make the decision over and over again
Mm-hmm.
and rely on how you feel that day as to whether you're going to contribute or not.
Mm-hmm. Can you expand on that a little bit? Because I only recently learned about passive investing, like in ETFs and index funds, which I regretted I didn't start earlier, but hey, never too late. So how can, again, like maybe start with like, what's the difference between passive and active for somebody who may be new to investing, and how can they automate it? What do you mean by that? And like, how can one determine what is right for them, passive or active investing?
Good. Okay. So the passive versus active words are very nuanced depending on what we're talking about. Just so that I'm clear and other people that might know or not know investments can just hear me out here.
Mm-hmm.
Passive versus active in the investment world means that if you are following an active investment strategy, you are trying to beat the market. You're trying to beat benchmarks because you feel you can time the market a certain way, or know things that the market doesn't know and jump in on that and take advantage of the market swings when they happen. It's a very tough road to go, and I would advise against that because the market knows a lot. And if you're going to be smarter than 7 billion people, then, maybe you are, but I would
Mm-hmm.
push against that. Passive, on the other hand, is saying, I know that the market is efficient and over time that it grows. So if I put my money in the market itself, the global stock market, and I diversify based on what the global stock market looks like, that is how I can passively grow my wealth.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay.
Versus, like, just one more piece to that, like in a business, if you're talking about passive income streams, right? A lot of times people think if I invest in real estate and I get rent from that real estate, that's passive income. I would also argue that it's not so passive because you're a landlord and it takes a lot of time and to manage the real estate,
Mhm.
but it's passive in that you don't have to be on the job to make money
Got it.
all the
Okay.
time,
Yeah.
which is a different passive.
That's true. I was initially thinking about passive and active related to the stock market, but thank you for pointing that out. There are different ways of looking at the, like you said, very nuanced. Was it Warren Buffett or someone's very famous that said something along the lines of you could never time the market, but it's important to have time in the market or something like that?
Yeah,
I think he said it right.
I don't know who said it, but somebody did say it. Yes, time in the market versus timing the market. And what that essentially means, there's a great book, it's called The Psychology of Money.
Yes,
Um,
Morgan Housel.
yes, yes. And he in there references, who did you just say? Warren Buffett. And it shows his trajectory of wealth. And basically it goes like this, his wealth. And then at the end, when he's like 65 years old, it starts
Yeah,
to just go like this, right?
yeah,
It's
that's where.
this this compound nature, right?
Yeah.
So more time in the market, letting your money compound is
Mhm.
exponential. And that's how your wealth takes off because you have 20, 30 years of investing, not because you invested for 1 year and picked the right stock.
Yeah, yeah. No, exactly. When I was learning all about and trying to build my financial literacy around investing, because as I mentioned to you earlier in our conversation, I think I personally um, was nervous and just never thought about investing outside of 401k because I mentioned my association with like my dad gambling and losing a lot of our family's money, and I just fear that stock market was kind of like gambling, instead of learning and knowing that there are different ways of investing in the stock market where you can have your money work for you and compound over the years. So that for me was like a huge eye-opening experience. And then, yeah, I remember reading or hearing about Warren Buffett's great, like his biggest wealth actually he achieved his biggest wealth after 60 or something, right? Because of the compound effect. So I, at least for me, like if you understand that concept and get started early on, like that would be such an amazing way to start building your wealth and having your money work for you.
Yeah. It takes patience though, right? Because everybody wants this instant gratification and it's just not there for most people
Yeah.
unless you win the lottery or develop Google. I mean, there's ways to do it, but chances are you're not going to do that. You're not going to be the professional athlete, most likely, right? So you just got to do it other ways that are more reliable.
Yeah. Such a, yeah, I'm like grinning really big because you hit on a word that has just been a constant theme in my overall life right now, but patience. And you mentioned earlier also when you are seeing other people on social media or online, you get into this comparison game that, can be dangerous or kind of make you fall into this trap of trying to follow their whatever blueprint or all these rich quick schemes because everyone is talking about how quickly they made their millions or doing this and that whatever. But again, back to our earlier point of the conversation, I think when you identify like what is your financial goal and like everyone's path to the financial goal or wealth is, to your point, nuanced, and then to have that mindset of patience if you want to accumulate the wealth. Because I don't know, I think like if you don't have that patience also and you're just trying to get rich quick, it's not really that easy as it may seem that other people are trying to portray online. What do you think? Is
Yeah.
that
Yeah, no, I agree. I think one of the biggest risks of chasing the get rich quick, other than the fact that most times you'll fail because they're schemes and they're not actual strategies,
Mhm.
is that if it works and you get rich quick, you might soon realize that the rich life isn't actually what you were chasing. It's like you climbed the wrong ladder and you got to the top of the ladder and you said, oh man, I wanted to be over there. But I didn't realize it because I was so focused on making money and I thought that was going to be the answer.
That's so interesting. That is a great point. Yeah. And I hear because I watch a lot and listen to a lot of podcasts, and one of my favorite podcaster actually, Tom Bilyeu. And he's a billionaire, he made billions. And he talked about how like, yeah, at one point I was chasing the money, I made billions and realized that wasn't really what I like that satisfied me, that fulfilled me. Yeah. And so that's a really great point. Like again, circling back to what is your real motivation? Like, what do you really want out of life? What do you want that money tool to work for you? Um, I want to also circle back because I believe you have a podcast with your wife, and you guys did an episode about like, money management and relationships. And I also mentioned how I grew up in a family where my parents fought about money all the time. And we know that common statistic. But let's say a couple, two people in a relationship, have very different mindsets around money, also spending habits about money. Like maybe one's a spender, one's a saver, one's more conservative, one's more like extravagant. How would you advise a couple? Obviously, you speak personally because you and your wife work together and in a relationship. But how would you advise a couple like that could kind of meet and work towards a financial goal and not have to be burdened and fight over money?
Well, I think one of the best questions to ask, and something that I often ask people when I'm not sure of what their motivations are around money and what they're trying to get at, is what is your first remembered experience about money?
Hmm.
And who knows if it's actually their first one that they can remember or not, but something's going to show up. And I just want to hear that. Like, what is it? Well, when I was 5 years old, my parents got in a fight and I saw my dad walk out the door and never come back. And it was a money fight. So like in my head, money is bad. Or I don't know, maybe it's my grandparents just used to spend money all the time, and they were so happy spending money. And I wanted that for my life, and it looked like that's how you get happy, is to spend money. So I feel like spending a lot of money is really important. Again, who knows what comes up, right? I'm just making things up
Yeah.
right now.
Mm-hmm.
But if you could identify that in each other and just hear the other person and share what they came up with, that's a step in the right direction. Because a follow-up question would be, well, what does money mean to you?
Mm-hmm.
Why is it important, or why is it not important in your life? And then you hear more about that, and you just start to get down to this really just raw level with somebody, and you can start to understand where they're coming from. And even if they don't believe the same things about money that you believe, you know why they're doing what they're doing, and the why behind what they're doing is really important, especially if you love them, because you know that you can come at things in two different ways, but understand each other and be empathetic about the situation and work together to evolve.
Yeah, I really love that because I didn't expect that answer. I was expecting more, and that's brilliant. And I think that's really is probably helps to build a more sustainable relationship with money between the couple, because I was expecting more like, okay, logically you guys can, meet in the middle and say you guys divide half of da. But it was really beautiful because it ties back into what we said about individually, before we plan for our individual financial future and plan, start asking those questions about yourself, about your past. But you are also saying ask each other in the relationship so you understand the why behind it, and that helps to, I think, then empathize and really understand where your partner is coming from, and just build a better bond that way, and that understanding versus, okay, let's just try to do it this way, and without understanding that why. So that was a really great point.
You mentioned something there. You said logic. And I think I'm a very logic driven person. And when something isn't logical, it makes me crazy. I'm like, I can't logic my way into the answer about why that person did this thing. And I just go nuts.
Yeah.
And so in conversations with my clients, I mean, I've been doing this now for 15 years, right?
Okay.
I've had my business for 10 years, and I've been talking to people in their 30s and 40s over that 10 years. So I've had thousands of conversations. And what I've found is that logic doesn't always make people take actions. Because
Mhm.
I could design a spreadsheet and show them exactly why they should do what I'm suggesting that they do from a numbers perspective, and it looks perfect, right? It's like, wow, your wealth can go here and that goes here, and you get all this money that you can then enjoy later in life. Yet they don't even move from where they're standing to go in that direction. And it's not about logic. It's you make decisions based on emotions, and then you find logic to back up those decisions, as you probably know. And so you got to really tap into the emotions about people and their money and why or why not they're going to do this thing. And only then are they going to actually take any actions.
Exactly. Very well said. And why I believe we were talking so much about in the early point of our conversation, the psychology behind the money, right? Because yeah, there's so much emotion behind it. And so that is so well said. So before we close off, I actually have um a closing tradition with my guest. And if you can go back to your younger self, Eric, to remind him or her to always live life on his own terms, is there something that you would like to pass on to him? And it doesn't have to be related to money, but a wisdom that you would pass on to him.
I mean, what was coming to mind right now, and it may not be the perfect answer, but it's you are enough, just as you are. Because I do think that in the past, I've always, not always, but like when I was younger, I always tried to represent a certain person, someone who's strong and confident and this and that. And I wasn't always strong and confident.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a false sense of that. And it really didn't help me focus on me, right? It was this outward vision of who I thought I should be. And only when I was grounded in myself in my late 20s into my early 30s did I realize that it was all within me to create my life, my happiness, and whatever happens to me is somehow impacted in from what I actually did or thought. And
Hmm.
so when you can take the control back and just be grounded in you and just live you, there's so much more power in that. And I just didn't get that for a long time.
Yeah, yeah. No, I couldn't agree with you more. That's actually what I tell my younger self, that I'm enough, because that was one of my biggest limiting beliefs. What were some of the kind of more transformative tools or ways that you were able to work from within to feel that you were enough?
Well, I did a lot of kind of personal growth training and development
Mm,
stuff in my. I feel like I definitely went through this quarter life crisis, where I hit 25 and I'm like, what am I doing? I was known as an athlete when I was in my school. And then when I graduated, I was no longer that. So
mhm,
who was I? Right. So that got me spinning in circles. And so reading a bunch of books is really important, I think, to just get some perspective. But ultimately, just going through training programs that really show you the mirror and say,
mm,
this is you now.
yep,
Deal with it.
yep.
And you're not broken, so you don't have to fix yourself, but like really get down and dirty with who you are and the relationships in your life and
Mhm.
approach them directly and resolve issues with other people, resolve issues with yourself, because then you have the freedom to be able to build something healthy going
Yeah,
forward.
yeah. I think recognizing that is huge. Like when, like you said, when you have that mirror, whether it's that mirror that you see in others or some other tool that's helping you see yourself as a mirror, that is huge. I actually have one last question, because your website, and I pointed this out, but it says that you work primarily with professionals in their 30s and 40s. Curious, why is that? Why did you kind of target professionals in 30s and 40s? Why not earlier or later in their life?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. There was an evolution there. In the beginning of my career as an advisor, I was working for other firms, and a lot of firms will work with baby boomers who are transitioning into retirement because they have a lot of wealth at that
Mhm.
point and they can manage the wealth, and it's just an easier relationship. And my old boss used to tell me to bring on that type of client. And I would say, I'm 27, 30 years old, whatever I was. I'm networking with people that are not that age, that they are probably my age instead. And so I
Mhm.
built this network up of people that were more my peers, which is natural. And I wanted to develop a company that could actually help them because those were the people that were asking me questions. Right.
Mhm.
So it was more about my age and where I was coming from and the connections that I had that made me realize that I could help them. And therefore I built a business around them. So as I get older, my clients naturally get older too with
Ah,
me.
got it. It's like you are able to um, meet the client where they're at, because you kind of you understand where they're at in their life, because they're kind of same age peer. Makes sense. Got
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And I can go through these things, right? Like
Mhm.
I can buy a house and have a child and get married and I don't know, just support aging parents, right? So I have all this perspective. So I have a technical um, career type of education, but then I also have the the realized because I've done it myself perspective too, and I can bring all that together and help my clients who then share things with me that they've done, and then I can apply that to the next person because we're all in a similar life path.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then it makes the person working with whoever is advising, it's like, oh, through they walked in my shoes. So maybe there's that level of trust, but also like, oh, if they can see themselves in that person guiding them because they've walked in those shoes.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Thank you, Eric. Before we sign off, I have to ask, how can our listeners connect with you and find you if they would like to learn more about what you do?
Yeah. I mean, based on our word of passive, right? If you want to do it passively, I think the best way to go is to our podcast at what's Beyond Finances, and you can find that anywhere, and hear about the things we're talking about to see if you can apply anything that we've said to your life. If you want to be more active and actually reach out and learn if we can be a good fit for you as an advisor, go directly to beyondyourhammock.com, and there's a little blue button that says work with us, and it runs you through how that would go if we were going to work together.
Sounds great. Love that name too. I will be sure to link to them in the show notes. And I really want to thank you for this expansive conversation around money, psychology, and mindset, and for your time, Eric. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Great questions. I really appreciate that conversation.
Thank you.